It is the third day without power. You have not opened the freezer since Tuesday. You have been walking past it, telling yourself it is fine, telling yourself the ice on top means the bottom is still cold. And this morning you finally put your hand on the lid and you lift it, and the smell comes up at you before you can get your face out of the way. $400 of beef, a whole hog you split with your brother, the turkey you bought on sale back in November because it was a good price and you were proud of yourself for thinking ahead. All of it out to the burn pile. Now I want you to sit with something a minute. About 100 years ago, on the same kind of ground you are standing on, there was a family of 9 that put up a hog every fall and ate off that hog until the middle of the next summer. Bacon in February, ham in April, sausage in the jar. And there was not one plug in the wall on that whole place. No compressor, no freezer, no ice box, not a single wire running to it. They did not lose the meat. They did not lose any of it. And here's the part that ought to stop you cold, because it stopped me. Those families are not all gone. Plain families, Amish families, are doing a version of it this morning, today, in Pennsylvania and Ohio and Indiana. They have the knowledge. You had it too, 3 generations back. Somewhere between your great-grandmother and you, it went out of the family 20 ways. That is what I have for you. 20 ways a house kept meat without electricity, counted down, and I am going to tell you at the top that not one of them was ever against the law for a man to do for his own table. Not in 1906, not in 1967, not this morning. What they took was not the skill. My name is Amos. I was raised back in a holler where the nearest store was a long way off and the money was shorter than the road. My people have been on that mountain longer than anybody kept count, and I have never had a mind to leave it. Near everything I'm about to tell you, my granddad wrote down. He kept a ledger, an account book, the kind you would keep for a store, except what he put in it was how a thing was done. Every way of doing the thing he was afraid would get lost. And he made me promise it would not die with him. This is me keeping that promise. Now, 3 of these I want you watching for. Number 14 is a single word your great-grandmother wrote in her cure and never once explained, and it is the reason her ham did not kill anybody. Almost nobody gets this right. Number 9 is the one that will feed you on foot, with no house and no fire, and the Army has known about it since before your grandfather was born. And number three is the one the Plain families lean on hardest today, the one that does more work than the smokehouse ever did, and it will cost you about $9 to start. If you have a mind to keep the old ways from dying, tap subscribe. Not for me, for the knowledge. It is going one way right now, and I would like a little help turning it around. Let us go. Number 20. And the money on this one is a rail car. Killing in the cold, Appalachia and Pennsylvania and everywhere else in this country from as far back as anybody wrote it down until about the 1950s. You did not decide when to kill a hog. The weather decided. You waited on the first hard cold snap that meant business when the nights were dropping into the 20s and staying there, and then word went around and the whole thing happened in about 2 days. Why the cold? Because a hog is a big animal and it carries a great deal of heat, and every hour that carcass sits warm is an hour something is growing in it. Cold weather was the refrigeration. It was free, it came once a year, and if you missed it, you waited. The ledger on that is simple. 1 hog, 9 people, bacon, ham, shoulder, sausage, lard, souse, and the bones for the pot. Fed until summer. Cost of the cold, nothing. Now, who took that away? In 1878, the refrigerated rail car went to work for the meat packers, and once beef could ride 1,000 miles cold, killing stopped being a thing the weather decided and became a thing a plant did every day of the year. That was not a wicked idea. It fed cities that could not feed themselves. But it quietly ended the reason anybody had to look at the sky first. And it is still true. Chilling the carcass fast is the first control on the USDA's own list. They just do it with a compressor now, and you did it with November. But cold weather alone will not hold it. You have got about a day. Number 19 is what you do with that day. Number 19, bleed it clean and get the animal heat out. Same ground, same century. This is the part nobody films. The hog is hung head down and it is bled out, and then it is left hanging overnight in the cold air with the body cavity open up so the air can get at it. My granddad called it letting the animal heat out. You do not cut it up warm. You do not touch it warm. You hang it and you go to bed, and in the morning that carcass is cold and stiff, clear through, and it cuts clean. What it bought you. A carcass that would take salt evenly instead of souring at the bone. That is the whole game right there. Most meat that went bad in the old days did not go bad on the outside where you could see it. It went bad deep in at the joint where the salt had not reached yet and the heat had not left. The suppression here is not a law, it is a job description. When killing moved into plants, the chilling moved into a room with a thermostat, and the knowledge of how a carcass sheds heat stopped being a thing a family needed and started being a thing an employee did. Nobody banned it. It just quit being anybody's business at home. The modern proof sits in every processing rule on the books. Rapid chill, then fabricate. Same order, same reason. Now, in the old days, you could not always trust the weather to hold. So you needed a cold place that did not care what the sky was doing. That is number 18. Number 18. And this one is the prettiest thing on the whole list. The springhouse. Appalachia and the Pennsylvania country, built as far back as before the 1750s, and still standing on some of these places today. You find where a spring comes out of the hill. You build a little stone house right over the top of it, and inside you cut a trough in the floor so the water runs through and out the other side. That is it. That is the whole invention. Now here is the why of it. Because the why is what makes you remember. Groundwater comes out of a mountain at about the temperature of the ground it came through, and that sits around 50 to 60 degrees the year round. In August, it is 55. In February, it is 55. It does not know it is August. Crocks of milk stood in the trough, butter, cream, and meat that was going to get eaten inside a few days sat in there wrapped out of the sun and out of the flies. What ended the springhouse was not meanness. It was the dairy codes. Cities had been sending inspectors out to the milk farms since the 1880s, and in 1924, the Public Health Service put out a model milk ordinance that pulled all of that into one standard. And what it said was that if you were going to sell milk, it had to be handled a particular way in a particular kind of room. Now, those rules save children's lives. I will say that plainly. Undulant fever and tuberculosis came out of dirty milk, and those rules put a stop to it. But a springhouse cannot pass a dairy inspection. And once you could not sell out of one, most folks quit keeping one. And the physics never changed. 55 degrees is 55 degrees. There are springhouses on plain farms this morning doing exactly what they did in 1890. Only trouble is, not every place has a spring. Number 17 is what you do if the water will not come to you. Number 17, you go down instead the root cellar. Same country, same era, and this is the one most of you have actually seen. You dig into a bank, or you dig straight down, and you get yourself below the frost line, and you put a door on it. Below the frost line, the ground quits, caring about the weather. It sits at about 50 to 55 degrees, near enough the same as a spring, and it holds there whether it is a heat wave or a blizzard on top of it. Now, I want to be honest with you, because this is where people get in trouble. A root cellar is not a meat locker. 55 degrees will hold cured meat, and it will hold your potatoes and apples and cabbage and turnips all winter long, and it will hold fresh meat for a couple of days in cold weather, and no longer. Anybody telling you different is going to make somebody sick. The ledger on it, though, a hole in the ground, dug once with a door, no power bill, no parts. My granddad's cellar was dug by his father, and it is still down there working, and it has never been repaired one time in 100 years. Nothing outlawed the root cellar either. What killed it was the tract house. After the war, we built millions of houses on slabs with no cellar in them at all, and a whole generation grew up with nowhere to put anything. And the counties know it works. Extension services still publish the plans. Pennsylvania has a whole field guide entry on it. But a cellar is 55 degrees, and 55 will not freeze a thing. If you wanted actual ice in July, you had to still it from January. That is number 16. Number 16. And here the money is enormous, and it is one man. The ice house, New England, from about 1806, and the mountain south right behind it. In the coldest part of winter, you went out on the pond with a saw and you cut ice into blocks. You hauled them into a building half sunk in the ground, and you packed them in sawdust or straw, and you shut the door. Sawdust is nothing but air-held steel, and air-held steel is the best insulation there ever was. And that ice sat there through the spring, through the summer, sometimes clear around to the next winter. Then you had cold in August, real cold. Enough to hold fresh meat, enough to make ice cream on the 4th of July, and that was a wonder to people. The man was Frederick Tudor out of Boston, and starting in 1805 and 6, he had the notion to cut New England pond ice and ship it to the Caribbean, and then to Europe, and then all the way to India. They called him the Ice King. At its peak, that trade had something like 90,000 men and 25,000 horses working in it. And then it died, and here is about when 1914, that is the year the factories drew level with the ponds and went by them. The men were still cutting better than 20 million tons a year off the ice when it happened. They just were not needed anymore. The machine won, and the ponds went quiet. Now that is 4 ways to be cold. That is where most folks stop when they talk about this. That is the first pattern break, and I want you to hear me. Everything from here on down does not need cold at all. Not a spring, not a cellar, not a pond, not a plug. From number 15 to number 1, these are the ways meat was made so that it did not care how warm your house got. That is the real knowledge. And number 14, the very next one after this, is the word almost nobody gets right. Number 15, the money here is a company that sells you water. The Salt Box, the Dry Cure, Appalachia, and every hog-killing county in the South and the Mid-Atlantic, 1800s straight through the 1950s, and it is still done today. Here is the picture, a wooden box or a bench, and the hams and shoulders and bellies laid in it, and salt rubbed hard into every face of that meat, worked into the joint, packed all around it, and it is not once. My granddad's ledger says rub her every day the first week. Then she sits in the box 6 to 8 weeks. What salt does is drink. It pulls the water out of the meat and out of anything living in the meat, and it will not stop until there is not enough water left in there for anything to grow. You are not poisoning the rod. You are starving it. The ledger, a ham that will hang a year, bacon that keeps in a warm kitchen, and salt cost almost nothing. Nobody outlawed the salt box. What happened is that a packing house learned it could pump a brine into a ham with needles in a few hours instead of waiting 8 weeks, and it could sell you back the water at ham prices. Go read a supermarket ham label. It will say water added, and there will be a percentage on it. Your great-grandmother's ham lost 30% of its weight on the way to being finished. That one they sell you gained. Now, there was a second thing in that box besides salt, and it is number 14, and this is the one I promised you. Number 14, saltpeter. And I want your full attention for about a minute here. Every old cure recipe in this country has it. Salt, sugar, black pepper, and saltpeter. My granddad wrote it in the ledger the way you would write flour in a biscuit recipe, like it needed no explaining, and he could not have told you what it did. His mother could not have told him. Nobody in that line knew saltpeter is potassium nitrate. And for the whole of the 1800s, everybody assumed the nitrate was the thing doing the work. It was not. What actually happens is that the nitrate gets turned into nitrite in the meat, and it is the nitrite doing every bit of it. 2 German chemists worked that out in the 1890s, and even then the government did not write nitrite into the rules until the 1920s. Your great-grandmother was in the ground a long time before anybody could have told her what was really in her own cure. And here is what the nitrite is doing, and it is not flavor, and it is not the pink color, although it does both. It is stopping Clostridium botulism. That is the one that kills you in a cured ham, and salt alone will not stop it, and smoke will not stop it, and there is no known substitute for nitrite. None. That is not my opinion. That is the standing position of the people who study this for a living. So the old rule, the one everybody's family said, that if it is salted and it is smoked and it is brown on the outside, then it is safe. That rule was wrong. It was wrong the whole time. The reason it mostly worked anyway is the spoonful of saltpeter nobody could explain. Now hear the honest part, because this is where I could get somebody hurt. The USDA sets exact limits on nitrite today, and they are exact for a reason. 120 parts per million in bacon, up to 625 in a dry cured piece. And the National Center for Home Food Preservation says plainly that you should buy a mixed cure and never handle pure nitrite yourself, because if you confuse it for salt in a recipe, you will make a lethal dose. That is their word, lethal. So do not go weigh this out by eye off a ledger. Buy the mixed cure, follow the sheet. Now, dry salt is one way to get salt into meat. There is a wetter way, and it is easier on a beginner, and that is number 13. Number 13, the brine barrel, the sweet pickle. A crock or an oak barrel and a brine made of salt and water and sugar, strong enough to float an egg, which is how they measured it because nobody had a hydrometer in the holler. The meat goes in, a clean board goes on top, and a rock on the board to hold it under, because anything that floats up above the brine is going to spoil and take the batch with it. And there it sits for weeks in a cold room, and the salt walks into that meat slow and even. The ledger. Salt pork out of a barrel, which is the thing that fed this country. It went on ships, it went west in wagons, it went down in mines. A barrel of salt pork was money you could eat. What took it was tin and then the plant. Once a cannery could hand you a sealed can for a dime, a wet barrel in the corner of the smokehouse looked like work, and it was work. The vindication is that every wet cured ham you have ever eaten is this, done by a machine on a schedule with the same salt, but salt gets you dry and it gets you safe. It does not get you that smell, the one that comes off a smokehouse door in November. That is number 12. Number 12. And I need to correct something you have probably been told. The smokehouse, cold smoke. Every farm of any size in this country, from the colonial years to about the 1960s, little building, tight boards, dirt floor, and a fire down at one end that is not under the meat. That is the part people get wrong. A cold smokehouse is not cooking anything. The fire is small, it is smoldering, it is hickory or oak or apple, and the smoke drifts and cools before it ever reaches the hams hanging up in the loft. If that meat gets hot, you have ruined it. What the smoke does, and this is worth knowing, it lays down compounds on the surface that slow bacteria and slow mold. It dries the outside into a skin, and it keeps insects off. It also tastes like the best thing you ever had in your mouth, and that is not nothing. Now here is what smoke does not do. Smoke does not make meat safe. Smoke on the outside of an unsalted, uncured piece of meat is a flavor and a suntan, and the inside of that piece does not know the fire's there. What ended the home smokehouse was mostly fire code and mostly town. You cannot run a smoldering fire in a wooden shed inside a city limit, and the packing industry gave you liquid smoke in a bottle in the meantime, which is real smoke condensed into water, and which does the flavor and none of the preserving. The proof it works is that a country ham cured and smoked this way is still legal to make and sell in Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee under state inspection, and people pay a great deal for one. So the ham is salted and it is smoked and it goes up in the loft. Now the flies find it. Number 11. Number 11, pepper and ash. This is a small one and I love it. Once the salt cure came off, the ham got rubbed down again, and what it got rubbed with was black pepper, coarse, a great deal of it, and often hickory ash out of the fireplace, and sometimes borax or molasses, depending on whose grandmother you ask. Why? Because in the spring the skipper flies come, and a fly does not need a hole. It will lay in a crease in the shank right where the bone comes out, and 3 weeks later that ham is ruined from the inside and you will not know until you cut it. The pepper is a barrier and the ash is a barrier, and then the whole ham went into a cloth sack, a stockinette, and got hung. 2 barriers, not 1. That was the rule. My granddad wrote it down as pepper her heavy and bag her, which is about as much instruction as he ever gave anybody. Nobody had to outlaw this. It just stopped mattering the day the ham went in a cooler, because a fly does not work at 38 degrees. And here is the current version, which will make you smile. Go buy a whole country ham today and it will arrive in a cotton sack with pepper on it. Same sack, same pepper. They never found a better way. Now the ham is in the sack and it is on the hook, and that is the second pattern break, and the stakes just changed. Everything above this line was about getting meat through one winter. Everything from here down is about getting it through a year, and then through the year after that on a shelf in the heat with nothing running. And number 3, the one I promised you at the top, the $9 one, that is the one that will still be feeding a house when every other thing on this list has been eaten. Here is the part that takes nerve. Number 10, doing nothing on purpose for a very long time. The long hang. The old hams went up in the loft of the smokehouse in the winter, and they stayed there through the spring and through the summer, and they were not eaten until the following fall. A year. Some went 18 months. Some went 2 years, and those were the ones you brought out when the preacher came. Now, everybody who has never done this asks the same question. Does it not spoil in the heat? No. And here is the why. By the time that ham has been in salt 8 weeks and smoked and hung a few months, it has lost about 1/4 to 1/3 of everything it weighed, and near all of what it lost was water. There is not enough water left in it for anything to live. The heat of that loft in July is not hurting it. The heat is finishing it. That is where the flavor comes from. The deep, nutty thing you get in a real aged ham, and you cannot rush it, and you cannot buy it. There is white mold on the outside by then. That is supposed to be there. You wipe it, and you go on. What was lost here was patience, and I do not think anybody stole it. It went when the paycheck came. A man who works in town cannot wait a year to eat. And the vindication is Spain and Italy and Kentucky, where the exact same hang, done the exact same way, produces the most expensive meat on earth. Now that is meat that stays in the house. Number 9 is meat that travels, and it is one I promised you. Number 9, drying. And this is the oldest one on the list by thousands of years. Cut across the grain, thin, and I mean thin, 1/4 inch, and salt it and hang it where the air moves and the sun or a low fire can get at it 2 or 3 days. The strips go dark and hard, and they will snap if you bend them. The physics is the same as the salt box, only faster and cheaper. You are taking the water out. Nothing living can live in a thing with no water in it. That is the entire secret of this whole episode, and I will say it again at the end. The ledger. A whole deer, taken in October, dried in a week, and carried in a sack. No jar, no crock, no fire, no cellar. It weighs 1/5 of what it weighed. A man could put a month of protein in a saddlebag. Nobody outlawed drying meat. What happened is a company put it in a bag with a window on it and charged you $30 a pound for it, and it is the same thing, and half the bag is sugar. And the confirmation is on your shelf. Go read the label on the jerky at the counter. Beef, salt, sugar, smoke. That is all your great-grandmother did, except she did not put in the corn syrup. But dry meat alone will not keep a man walking in the cold. It is missing something, and the northern people solved that a long time ago. Number 8, pemmican, North America. And the Plains people had it long before anybody wrote it down. And the fur companies and later the polar expeditions ran on it clear into the 1900s. Take the dried meat from number 9 and pound it to a powder. Render your fat separate and get it clean and hot and liquid. Pour the fat over the powdered meat and work it together, and pack it into a bag or a skin while it is warm and let it set hard. Now here is what is clever, and it took me years to understand it. The dried meat has no water, so nothing can grow. And the fat, once it sets, is a seal. It puts a wall of grease around every particle of that meat so that the air cannot reach it. 2 protections, work in 2 different ways in one brick. The ledger. Pemmican kept 2 years and more. It has the protein and it has the fat, which is the fuel, And in cold country, the fat is the part that keeps you alive. Men crossed a continent on it. Nobody suppressed pemmican. It is just ugly, and it does not sell, and it will never be on a shelf next to the sports drinks. And the fat as a seal idea, that is not a curiosity. That is the whole basis of the next one. And number 7 is where a great many families actually lived. Number 7, rendering the lard. Hog killing day in the yard. And there is a big black kettle over a fire, and every scrap of fat off that hog is going in it, cut small, and it cooks slow for hours while somebody stirs it so it does not scorch. What comes out is lard poured off clean into crocks and stone jars, and what is left in the bottom is the cracklings, which went in the cornbread, and which is the reason grown men get sentimental. The ledger on this one is the longest on the list. Lard is your cooking fat all year. It is your pie crust and your biscuit. It is what you fry in. It is soap when you cook it with lye. It waterproofs your boots, and it greases the wagon. And most of all for us today, it is the seal on number 6. The suppression on this one has a date, and it is a good one. Starting around 1911, the cottonseed oil people brought out a white shortening in a can and spent 30 years and a fortune teaching American women that lard was old-fashioned and unhealthy. Then in the 70s and 80s, everything went to hydrogenated vegetable oil, which we now know was worse, and which had to be pulled out of the food supply. So the vindication here is loud. Lard is back on the shelf at the store, and back in the good bakeries, and back in the pie crust. Now, what did they do with all that lard? That is number 6. Number 6. And I am going to tell you about it, and then I am going to tell you not to do it. Potting under a lard seal, England for centuries, and every Appalachian and Pennsylvania kitchen straight through to the 1940s. You cook the meat down until it is falling apart and salty. You pack it hard into a crock, hard, so there is no air in it anywhere. Then you pour hot rendered lard over the top of it, a good 1/2 inch, right to the edges, and it cools and it sets into a solid white lid. You put a cloth over that and you set it in the cellar. The thinking was airtight. Nothing can get in through a plug of fat. And it worked most of the time for a very long time. And that is the trouble, because botulism does not need air. It is the one that prefers no air. A sealed crock of low salt meat in a 55-degree cellar is close to the exact conditions that thing wants. And the ones that went wrong silently. No smell, no bulge, no warning. So I am giving you this one as history. It is in the ledger and it belongs in the record, and I will not pretend it is not there. But do not go put up meat under lard in your cellar this fall. There is a better way to do the same job, and it is number 3, and I will get you there. That is the 3rd pattern break, and here it is. Everything from 6 on down is about sealing meat away from the air. Number 6 is the old way of doing that, and it is the dangerous one. Number 3 is the modern way. It is what the plain families actually use. It cost about $9, and it is the reason this whole episode has a happy ending. Stay with me. Number 5, sausage. Grind what is left. Every trim, every scrap off the shoulder and the neck and the odd ends, and you are not throwing out the fat. You want a good 1/3 of it fat, or you will make a dry, sad thing. Salt it, sage, pepper, red pepper, if that is your family. And here's the part everybody misses. Sausage is not just chopped meat. Sausage is a preservation method. The salt is doing the same work it did in the salt box, and the casing, the natural casing off the animal itself, is doing the same work the lard did. It is a wall against the air. Then it hangs in the smokehouse in the cold, and it dries and it firms. The ledger, the parts of a hog that no butcher shop will ever sell you, turned into the best thing on the table. Nothing on that animal wasted, not 1 ounce. The rule that reached this one is real. Sausage made at home for your own family is fine and always has been. The moment you sell 1 link of it, you are in the Federal Meat Inspection Act, and you need an inspected facility. That is why the little country butcher who used to make his own is mostly gone, and the ones left are working under inspection. And the vindication is Italy and Spain again, where dry cured sausage hung in air as a protected national product with a law defending it. Now, if sausage was the way to use the scraps, number 4 is how they use the parts you have never even seen. Number 4, souse, scrapple, and head cheese. Do not make a face at me. Sit with it a minute. When the hog was down, the head and the feet and the hocks went in the pot and boiled for hours, and everything came off the bone, and that broth set up into a jelly on its own because of what is in those joints. Chop the meat, mix it back in, add vinegar and black pepper and sage, and press it into a pan. It's set solid. You slice it cold. Scrapple is the same idea with cornmeal worked in, and you fry the slices in the morning. Now here is the preservation in it, because there is real preservation in it. The vinegar drops the acid, and a good sharp acid is a wall bacteria cannot climb. Same reason a pickle keeps. And it was cold, and it was eaten within the month. The ledger. The parts every one of us now pays to have hauled away, feeding a family for 3 weeks. Nothing outlawed souse. What killed it is that we got rich enough to be squeamish, and a supermarket cannot sell a head. And the confirmation is that Pennsylvania has a law in the book saying what scrapple has to be not less than 40% meat. The government will not tell you where a man is allowed to make it. It will tell you how much hog has to be in it. And head cheese is on the counter of every good deli in Europe. Now, number 3, the one I promised you at the top, and the one that does more work than any other on this list. Number 3, meat in a glass jar. This is what the Plain families actually run on. Not the smokehouse, not the crock. The jar. Go in an Amish cellar in Ohio this week and you will see a wall of quart jars with beef and chicken and pork and broth standing in them, put up last fall, and it will feed that house until spring. The pressure canner, heated on a propane burner or right on the wood cook stove. Raw meat or browned, packed in the jar, lid on, into the canner. Now hear this part exactly, because this is where somebody could die, and I would rather they did not. Meat is a low acid food. Low acid foods have to be pressure canned. They cannot be water bath canned. A pot of boiling water only ever gets to 212 degrees, and botulism spores live through that all day long. A pressure canner takes it to 240, 250 degrees, and that is what kills the spore. 10 pounds of pressure up to 1,000 feet of elevation. 15 pounds above that, that is not a preference. That is the USDA specification, and it is the difference between supper and a funeral. The ledger. Jars that keep years on a shelf at room temperature, no cold at all, no cellar needed. Open one and it is cooked already. And who suppressed it? Nobody. Nobody at all. This is the one place where the modern rule and the old way are the same thing, and the modern rule made the old way safer. The canner in that Amish kitchen is a modern canner, say the true thing. Which brings me to number 2, and number 2 is the one I would get letters about if I left it out. Number 2, the honest one. A lot of Plain families today are keeping meat cold. I am not going to stand here and tell you the Amish have no refrigeration, because that is not true, and you would be right to correct me. What is true is that it is not on the grid. There are propane refrigerators in those kitchens, gas absorption units that cool with a flame instead of a motor and never touch a wire. There are propane chest freezers. Some communities run cooling off diesel or off hydraulics, and some buy block ice delivered, and a good many share a rented locker at a community freezer plant in town. So the real distinction, the one that actually matters, and the one nobody puts in a title, is not cold versus no cold. It is dependence versus independence. That house is not helpless when the power goes out, because the power was never the thing holding its food together in the first place. It has the propane, and it has the springhouse, and it has the cellar, and it has that wall of jars, and if you took away any one of them, there are 4 more underneath it. You have one, you have a freezer, and it is plugged into a wire that runs to a pole that runs to a station 100 miles away that you have never seen and cannot fix. That is the difference. It was never about the cold. And now number 1, Number one is not a way of doing a thing. Number one is what all 19 of the others were really about. I told you at the top that not one thing on this list was ever illegal for a man to do for his own table, and I want to prove it to you now, because I think you have been carrying something that is not true. The Federal Meat Inspection Act came in 1906, and it was needed. Go read what was in the packing houses in Chicago, and then come tell me it was not needed. But it only reached meat that crossed a state line. Then in 1967, the Wholesome Meat Act closed that up and reached inside the states too, and every state had to run inspection equal to or better than the federal or the USDA would come do it for them. And here is the thing that sits in the middle of that law, right there in the code, 9 CFR 303.1, the personal use exemption. And what it says in plain English is that none of it applies to a man slaughtering his own livestock and preparing it for himself, his household, and his non-paying guests. That is still the law this morning. In all 50 states, you can raise a hog, you can kill it, you can salt it, smoke it, hang it a year, grind it, case it, can it, and eat every bit of it at your own table with your family and your neighbors around it. And there is not one word in any statute in this country that says otherwise. There is exactly one thing you cannot do with it. You cannot sell it. And that right there is the whole thing. That is what happened to this knowledge. Nobody came up the holler and took the ledger out of my granddad's hands. What happened is that the money left. Once you could not sell a ham you cured, curing a ham stopped being a trade a young man could learn from an old one and turn into a living. It became a hobby. And a hobby is the first thing a working family drops. They did not outlaw it. They just made sure nobody would ever be paid to teach it to you again. So it thinned out. One generation did it because they had to. The next did it because their mother did. The one after that had a freezer and a job in town and did not see the point, and the ledger went in a drawer. And that is where I found it. Now, those 20 were not mine to keep. They are yours again as of tonight. Do not let them die on your watch. Here is what I would have you do this week, and it is small. Not a hog. Not yet. Go and dry a pound of beef. Cut it thin across the grain, salt it, and hang it where the air moves for 2 days. That is number 9, and it is the oldest one on the list, and you can do it in a kitchen with nothing you do not already own. When it snaps, instead of bending, you have just done the thing your great-grandmother did, and you did it right, and nobody had to sell it to you. And when the power goes out this winter, and it will, I would like you standing in front of that freezer thinking something other than what you thought the last time. Next time I want to tell you about the 2-cent thing my great-grandmother kept in a tin on the shelf above the stove. It is not a spice, and it is not a medicine, though she used it for both. And there was a stretch of about 20 years where an entire industry could not sell against it, and had to spend real money making sure you forgot the name of it. She kept it in a tin because it drew damp. That is your clue. Tap subscribe if you have not, and tell me down in the comments what county you are in and whether there is still a springhouse or a smokehouse standing on your people's place, because I read every one of those, and it is the best part of my week. There are hundreds more of these in that ledger, and I mean to pull every last one back into the daylight before I'm done. So pull up a chair by the fire. The old ways remembered. I will see you next time.